It began with silence, the kind of silence that presses against your ears, heavy and suffocating, as though the building itself is holding its breath. The hotel lobby was nearly empty, its dim chandelier casting weak yellow light across peeling wallpaper and furniture that felt older than memory. A single clock ticked from behind the front desk, each sound echoing like a heartbeat in a hollow chest. Then came the scream, piercing, sudden, and so raw that it seemed to slice through the stillness of the night. It came from the third floor, a woman's voice, desperate, cracking into terror, and then it stopped, cut short in a way that suggested not escape, but silencing. Guests froze where they stood, some rushing to the staircase, others gripping their bags tighter, too afraid to move. One man swore he saw her, a figure at the end of the hallway, hands reaching out, eyes wide in terror, and then gone, vanished, as though the shadows themselves had swallowed her whole. People whispered about faulty wiring, about pranks, about nerves, but deep down, they all knew, this wasn't coincidence. This was history repeating itself. But nothing could prepare them for the moment the walls themselves seemed to breathe. She had checked in late, just after dusk, dragging her suitcase across the cracked tiles that lined the hotel's entrance. A business trip had brought her here one night, a quick meeting the next morning, and then gone. The city had been booked solid, and this place, tucked into a forgotten corner near the train station, was the only option left. At first glance, it looked serviceable enough. But there was something about the way the neon sign flickered, sputtering, like a dying breath, that made her pause before stepping inside. The lobby smelled faintly of mildew. The air conditioner rattled as if choking on dust, and the wallpaper curled back from the walls in jagged strips. Behind the counter, the clerk barely looked up, his eyes darting from her face to the ledger, then back again. He spoke in clipped sentences, handing her a tarnished brass key instead of a card. His final words, muttered under his breath, were almost a warning: stay quiet after midnight. As she made her way to the elevator, the doors groaned open to reveal a man stepping out. His suit was disheveled, his eyes wild, his suitcase clutched as though it were a lifeline. He brushed past her without a word, moving so quickly it was as if he was fleeing. She turned, watching him disappear through the lobby doors, the clerk refusing to acknowledge his exit. The elevator creaked as it climbed, carrying her into the dimly lit hallways above. Each step she took echoed longer than it should have, as though the building itself was listening. She told herself it was nothing, just a cheap stay, a bed for the night, nothing more. They thought it was just a cheap stay for one night, but they were wrong, long before it became a stopover for weary travelers. The hotel was a landmark, a proud structure built in the roaring 20s, advertised in old newspapers as a haven of elegance. It promised velvet drapes, grand chandeliers, and a bar that never closed. Politicians, businessmen, and drifters all passed through its doors, but beneath the polished veneer, shadows lingered, and those shadows never left. The first tragedy came in 1931, when a young woman was found at the bottom of the stairwell, her body twisted unnaturally, her eyes wide open as if frozen in the moment of her fall. The official report claimed an accident, but witnesses whispered that her scream echoed 4 minutes after she hit the ground. Guests left in droves, but the owners quickly rebranded, layering fresh wallpaper over the stains and calling it progress. It didn't last. Disappearances began to stack up, traveling salesmen who never checked out, couples whose luggage remained untouched in their rooms, maids who vanished between shifts. Each time management spun the story, they left without paying, they ran off together. She found another job, but the staff knew. They had heard the knocking in empty hallways, the footsteps pacing when no one was there. By the 1970s, the hotel's reputation had curdled into something darker. Occult groups were rumored to rent out the basement ballroom, holding ceremonies. That went on until dawn. Some said they left symbols etched into the walls, circles and sigils still faintly visible beneath the peeling paint. Others swore that whatever they summoned never truly departed, that the hotel itself had become a vessel. And yet, every few years, a new owner would arrive, scrubbing at the building's history with marketing slogans and cheap renovations. Brochures promised affordability, comfort, and charm. Families booked rooms. Travelers found deals online. The cycle continued. Guests walked in with optimism, ignoring the strange drafts, the flickering lights, the way the air felt heavier. Moment the doors closed behind them, the hotel always smiled at them, luring them deeper into its halls. But its smile was only paint over rotting wood, a mask hiding a hunger that never faded. And yet, what happened decades ago had never truly ended. Her name was Amina, a 32-year-old consultant who had built her career out of determination and grit. The daughter of immigrants, she had grown up in a world that didn't expect much from her, where people whispered doubts about her future and questioned her worth. Yet she refused to fold. Every late-night study session, every long shift at her part-time job, every sacrifice her parents made, it had all carried her forward. By the time she graduated at the top of her class, she wasn't just chasing success, she was proving something to herself, to her family, to every person who had underestimated her. But success came with a cost. Amina's job demanded constant travel, endless meetings in faceless cities. She had grown used to empty airports and cheap hotels, places where she felt more like a shadow passing through than a person truly belonging. Still, she carried herself with quiet pride, always reminding herself that every step she took was a continuation of her parents' struggle, that she was walking roads they had once only dreamed of. That night her trip had already been grueling. Delayed flights, missed connections, and hours of exhaustion weighed heavy on her shoulders. She just wanted sleep, a brief rest before her presentation the next morning. She didn't care about the flickering lights in the lobby or the stale air that clung to the hallways. She told herself she was strong, rational, unshaken by creaks in old buildings or glances from strangers. She'd endured too much in life to be scared by something as trivial as a rundown hotel. But under that determination was also fatigue. The kind of fatigue that makes a person ignore red flags, that whispers, just get through the night, nothing will happen, you'll be fine. That vulnerability would prove dangerous. In her room, she unpacked only the essentials: laptop, charger, notes, and placed them carefully on the desk, preparing for the morning. She called her mother, a ritual she never skipped, assuring her everything was fine, that the hotel was charming in its own way. She didn't mention the clerk's warning, she didn't mention the man fleeing. She convinced herself it was all in her head. Amina believed she had survived the hardest parts of life already: prejudice, doubt, and relentless pressure. She thought the worst battles were behind her, but the true test of her strength, the one no one could prepare her for, was only just beginning. They thought the worst was behind them, until the knocking started at midnight. The first knock was so faint she almost convinced herself she imagined it, a soft tap against the door, no louder than the ticking of the old radiator in the corner. She lay still, eyes fixed on the ceiling, waiting. Then came another knock, sharper this time, deliberate. She sat up, pulse quickening, straining to listen. Through the silence that pressed in around her, the hallway outside was quiet, yet she thought she heard footsteps, slow, dragging, as though someone was pacing back and forth. She told herself it was just another guest returning late, maybe someone drunk, maybe someone confused about their room number. But then, through the vent above her bed, came a whisper. Not words she could understand, just a low, breathy murmur that seemed to move in rhythm with her heartbeat. She tried to laugh it off, reminding herself that old buildings creak, pipes groan, air ducts carry strange noises. She repeated it like a mantra: it's nothing, it's nothing, it's nothing. But the unease grew heavier with every sound. At one point the door handle rattled gently, as though someone were testing it, turning it halfway before letting go. Her throat tightened, her hands gripped the sheets, and every instinct screamed at her to call the front desk, to run, to leave. Yet she stayed frozen, caught between reason and fear, between logic and the primal voice inside her that whispered, "You're not alone." Then, without warning, the door creaked open just an inch, the faint glow of the hallway spilling across the carpet. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe, staring at that narrow sliver of darkness that seemed to widen with every heartbeat. She forced herself to lean forward, eyes dropping to the gap at the bottom of the door. And that's when she saw it, a shadow, unmistakably human, waiting. But when they looked under the door, they saw the shadow of someone waiting. The shadow did not move at first. It lingered there, stretching across the thin line of light under the door, patient, unhurried. Amina held her breath, every muscle in her body stiff with dread. Then came the sound, a long, deliberate inhale, like someone dragging air into lungs that had no right to be breathing. The doorknob rattled again, harder this time, twisting violently before snapping back into place. She stumbled backward, nearly tripping over her open suitcase. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with a smell that turned her stomach. Damp, earth, mold, and something metallic, like rust or blood. The vent above her bed groaned, releasing another whisper, and for a terrible moment she thought it was calling her name. The door slammed open. A figure stood in the doorway, tall but bent in unnatural angles. its face obscured by shadow except for the glint of hollow eyes that seemed to drink in every flicker of light. Its presence consumed the room, pulling the warmth from the air. The floorboards groaned beneath its weight as it stepped forward, each movement deliberate, confident, like a predator savoring the fear of its prey. Amina's chest tightened, her mind racing for logic, for an explanation, but all that came was instinct. Run. She darted toward the bathroom, slamming the door shut and twisting the lock. Almost instantly, the handle jerked violently. The pounding began, shaking the flimsy frame, dust falling from the ceiling with every hit. Her breaths came in shallow gasps. She searched the small bathroom for anything, a weapon, a tool, but found only a cracked mirror and a rusted towel rack. She ripped the rack from the wall, gripping it with trembling hands. The pounding stopped. Silence stretched on, thick and unbearable. Then, slowly, the sound of nails, long, sharp, scraped across the door, metal against wood, shrill and deliberate. A laugh, hollow and breathless, drifted through the crack beneath. In desperation, she smashed the bathroom window with the towel rack. Glass shattered outward into the night. She didn't hesitate. With cuts burning across her arms, she hauled herself through the jagged frame, the cold air slapping her skin as she scrambled onto the fire escape. Behind her, the bathroom door burst open. The figure lunged, a blur of darkness, reaching out with skeletal hands. She threw herself down the fire escape, metal rattling beneath her feet as she half climbed, half fell. The wind roared in her ears, drowning out the voice still chasing her, a voice that seemed to promise, "You cannot leave me." She hit the ground hard, knees buckling, lungs heaving as she staggered to her feet. For one breathless moment, she thought she had done it, she had survived. But then the hotel windows lit up all at once, every room glowing with an unnatural light, and in each one a silhouette stood watching. They thought they'd survived, but the real horror was only beginning. When morning came, the hotel looked unchanged, as though the night had never happened. Sunlight filtered lazily through the dusty windows of the lobby, pooling across the worn carpet and chipped furniture. The clerk sat behind the desk, head bent over the ledger, pen scratching quietly. There were no signs of doors slamming, no shattered glass in the bathroom above, no trace of the figure that had stalked her through the night. To anyone else, it was just another day. Amina stumbled through the lobby, pale and trembling, clutching her suitcase as though it were armor. Her arms were still raw with cuts from the broken window, her clothes torn, her eyes ringed with sleepless terror. She expected alarm, sympathy, even curiosity. But the clerk didn't lift his gaze. He slid the checkout slip across the counter without a word, as though nothing at all had happened. She signed it with a shaking hand and fled into the daylight, promising herself she would never look back. Yet the story didn't stay buried. She tried to tell the police, but the report was thin, filed away under no evidence. She called the travel agency, only to be told the hotel had a clean record, no complaints, no history worth investigating. But then, online, the whispers began. Reddit threads exploded, some filled with skeptics mocking her, others filled with eerie confirmation. I stayed there too. Same room, same noises, same shadows. Travel blogs whispered warnings, writing in coded language to avoid lawsuits. And in hushed corners of the internet, people claimed the hotel was cursed, that anyone who stayed in room 6 carried the mark of something that never let go. Her story became more than her own. It became a piece of folklore, a warning, an entry in the long list of places people swore to avoid. Still, there were those drawn to it, thrill-seekers, skeptics, or the desperate with nowhere else to go. The hotel fed on them all, swallowing their stories the same way it had swallowed hers. Weeks later, another headline appeared. Another guest, another disappearance, and then another disappearance made headlines. Amina would carry the night with her forever. The scars on her arms faded, but the memory never dulled. The scraping nails, the hollow laughter, the shadow waiting just beyond the door. For weeks she woke at midnight, convinced she could still hear that faint knock, certain that if she reached for the light switch, it would already be too late. Yet even in the grip of fear, she understood something powerful. She had survived. Her voice shook the first time she told her story publicly, but she refused to let silence protect the hotel. She warned others to trust their instincts, to never dismiss the unease that crawls along the back of the neck, to never ignore the places that seem wrong the moment you step inside. Evil doesn't always hide in dark forests or abandoned houses. Sometimes it waits behind a smiling front desk, tucked neatly into the folds of the ordinary, wearing the mask of comfort. For every skeptic who dismissed her, there were others who listened, travelers who had doubted their own senses, who now felt seen, vindicated. She gave them language for their dread, proof that terror was not always imagined. Her survival became more than a personal escape. It became a reminder that even in the darkest nights, courage is what gets you out alive. But courage does not close every door. Some remain open, whispering for the next traveler, the next soul too tired or too desperate to turn away. The hotel thrives on forgetfulness, on society's refusal to confront what it does not understand. And so it waits, silent by day, restless by night. Its walls still breathe, its shadows still stretch across the halls, and its hunger never fades. Amina escaped, but the story is not finished. But the hotel still stands, waiting. And the story isn't over. This was the true hotel horror story. A night that began with exhaustion and routine, but spiraled into something no one could explain, something that still clings to those who enter its halls. Amina's survival is a reminder that even ordinary places can conceal the most extraordinary dangers. A simple check-in can become a battle for your life. But the question lingers. What would you have done in her place? Would you have ignored the knocking, brushed off the whispers, convinced yourself it was only the building settling? Or would you have run the moment you felt the air grow heavy, the moment your instincts screamed to leave? We want to hear from you. Have you ever stayed somewhere that felt wrong, a place where the silence was too deep, the shadows too long? Share your story in the comments below. And if you're brave enough to keep listening, subscribe for more chilling tales. Share this with a friend, but only if they dare to book a room again, because the next story might be theirs.